Hello, everyone. Once again, I'm so happy to welcome you to our session today. My name is Kelly Hansen. I am the Director for Education and Insights at NGA. Thank you for joining our webinar. As I said, it is titled EBT Skimming, Deceptively Easy, How to Protect Your Business and Your Customers. And I'm so glad to have two experts alongside us today. Before we get started, just a couple of reminders. We do record these events so that anybody who's not able to attend live can still access the information. If you can, please make sure that you are muted throughout so that we don't have any background noise and it's easy to hear through that recording. We will be accepting questions throughout the content that's shared today, so please use the chat features in Microsoft Teams to share any comments or questions that you have as the presenters are going through the content. We're going to look forward to some discussion and Q&A time towards the end of the presentation. I do want to take just a moment to address our commitment to antitrust. The National Grocers Association is committed to complying with the antitrust laws, and to ensure compliance, the board of directors, members, and staff must refrain from engaging in discussions that may result in antitrust violations. This can include agreements to fix prices, allocate markets, engage in product supplier or customer boycotts, and refusal to deal with industry members. NGA appreciates your compliance with the law as the board and members engage in association meetings and education programs like this one. Today's webinar is brought to you by the National Grocers Association in partnership with the NGA Foundation TA Center. This team works to support several federal grant-funded programs to ensure that independent grocers have access to these opportunities as well. These programs help grocers increase healthy food access in their communities, incentivize purchase of fruits and vegetables, and give grocers the tools that they need to offer SNAP EBT payment through online e-commerce shopping experiences. Today, I'm joined by Carrie Welkwitz, who is the project director for our SNAP online TA services, and also a subject matter expert, Guy Berg, who serves as our EBT payments advisor. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I will turn it over to you, Carrie, and get us started.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kelly. Hi, everyone. Just a quick introduction myself. So I'm Carrie Welkwitz, as Kelly said. I've been with NGA Foundation for about 2 years. I'm a project director with the foundation where I work on SNAP EBT modernization efforts. So that can include SNAP Online, the transition to EBT chip cards, mobile payments pilot, so being able to use EBT benefits via your mobile phone, and a lot of other food access projects. And I'm going to pass it over to Guy to give himself a quick introduction, and then we'll get started.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. So I'm the Senior Vice President of what we call a SKU Network at SKUX, and that's a fintech company that offers item-level payments to retailers and grocers. But in addition to that, I've spent most of my career helping the industry adopt emerging technologies into payments. I worked for the Federal Reserve for 8 years in their team for strategies for improving the U.S. payment system. I also played a large role in consulting in the whole EMV or chip card migration in the United States from 2016 forward. And now I'm a consultant and working within in Carrie's group.
Sounds good. Thanks, Guy. And Guy is a wealth of information, so we very much appreciate that he works with us. I'm going to get started into showing our agenda. We're going to talk about a few different things today. So first, I'm going to very, very briefly cover a little bit about the NGA Foundation, and then we'll go into background on fraud, as well as fraud mitigation options. And then we'll talk about the transition to chip cards for EBT and some tips for retailers to summarize everything. And feel free to put questions in the chat, where we should have time at the end to be able to address questions. The other thing we wanted to mention is that Guy and I tried to set this up as being kind of more informal. So rather than just each of us kind of taking a handful of slides, we're going to try to interact with each other, more information interview style. So if you see us kind of asking each other different questions and thoughts on the topics that we're going to be discussing, that is on purpose, and hopefully we'll keep it more entertaining and light. So with that, we will continue on. So very quickly, the reason we include this information is often there's confusion on, um, you know, within the TA centers of the National Grocers Association Foundation, how they fall within National Grocers Association, the foundation themselves. And often people think we're actually a government agency or entity as well. So we like to include this just to give a bit of background information. So at the top is the National Grocers Association that represents independent community grocers throughout the country, as well as their wholesaler partners. And there's about 1,800 different retailer members that are a part of NGA, and they operate around 9,000 stores. Independent grocers themselves account for about $250 billion in revenue annually and about 1.2 million jobs. And I'm going to advance. So within NGA, there is also the foundation, and the foundation works on a number of different things. It works on leadership development, student programming, so getting students interested and equipped to work within the grocery industry. And then we also provide technical assistance. So I'm just going to very briefly focus on the technical assistance right now, which is why we're here. We offer through a few different grants, we offer free one-on-one support to any grocer retailer within the United States. So you do not need to be an NGA member. Anyone can reach out for help, and we're happy to help anybody. We have a few different focus areas. So one is nutrition incentives. We can help grocers get set up with double up food bucks. That's the most common name for nutrition incentives, as well as understand the technology related to produce prescription cards, healthy benefit cards, things like that. We also work closely on SNAP EBT modernization efforts. So one of those things is SNAP Online. So the ability to use your EBT benefits through e-commerce. And then if I'm kind of going, I guess, counterclockwise, we also help with the transition of EBT cards that contain a chip. So from the traditional Meg Stripe cards to the new rollout of EBT cards that contain a chip. I didn't include this in the slide, but we're also starting to help with mobile payments as well for EBT. And then finally, we offer assistance for the Healthy Food Financing Initiative Fair Fund. I won't go into detail, excuse me, on this, but basically it is a fairly large pot of money that grocers can apply to either get via a grant or a loan to either expand their grocery store or start a new grocery store, improve their business. The focus is on improving food access in underserved areas. So if any of these things are interested, feel free to reach out to me. I can provide more information offline outside of this webinar. So with that, we are going to start talking about fraud, which is why we're here today. So we wanted to give a little bit of a background on, what is fraud when we talk about EBT fraud. Often that phrase is used and there's a little bit of confusion on what we mean. We don't mean fraud as it relates to a person who receives or uses EBT benefits committing fraud. More likely, fraud is occurring where their benefits are being taken from them, and there's different ways in which that occurs. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We wanted to give a quick timeline of different trends that have been happening in the last 10 or so years for fraud. So first, the first thing that we wanted to mention was just within 2015, 2018, thereabouts, EBT skimming attacks really started to surge. And in particular, these happened at gas pumps and at ATMs. I recall, in the news, hearing stories about being careful at ATMs because of different skimmers that might be placed on the swiping device within a gas pump or an ATM. Beginning in 2019 through about 2021, the fraud kind of migrated and fraudsters started targeting mobile EBT terminals and unattended kiosks. And then in 2021 to 2022, that's when we started to see a shift to remote EBT fraud via data scams. So it's things like phishing and malware, and that became much more common. And then finally, well, not finally, we're still experiencing fraud, but in 2022, roughly to 2023, was when there was really an uptick in more sophisticated EBT fraud. And this was where organized crime attacks started getting involved with EBT fraud. So Guy, one of the things that we sort of talked about as we were prepping this presentation is whether you had any thoughts on the timeline and any trends that you saw with this timeline as it compares to the work that you did with traditional EMV transition to chip.
Yeah, actually, something's very interesting. If you look at the 2015 to 2018 timeframe where there's the increase or the surge in skimming attacks, and there's a couple words you used in your description of this. One you said migration, one you said shift, and the interesting thing about that is that whenever you're talking about payments fraud, in particular, they always talk about if you close down one form of fraud, it usually shifts or migrates to another form of fraud. And oftentimes people use the analogy of a balloon. If you squeeze the balloon, it might narrow in the part where you squeeze it, but it gets bigger in other parts of it. And why I bring that up is that when the rest of the card industry, the Visa, the MasterCard, JCBs, and all of those Discover moved to the chip card, it started in 2015. And about that time, the reason they moved the chip card in the first place was because of the extent of card cloning, which card cloning basically is another way of skimming, where they would steal the data from the make stripe and they'd create a clone card and start using that. And that represented like 80% of card fraud at that point in time. And so when they started shifting to the chip, what happened is they were starting to squeeze that balloon. And so it actually caused a surge of skimming attacks. And it's interesting to see that that also hit the EPD sector also. So that was one of the first things that came to me when I was looking at this. The other thing that happened, if you look at the 21, 22 time frame, even before that, again, because of the chip adoption, what happened was that there was, the whole skimming attack was largely taken away. And so they started shifting to other forms of fraud and attacks. And one of them, of course, was through the data scams and the phishing and malware. So even as you look at these trends, when I look at, I can see these other events that were happening in the industry. It makes perfect sense that greater attacks started focusing into the EBT segment.
Yeah, that's interesting. And one of the things we also wanted to make sure that we highlight, so this is kind of the perfect time, is that I think we use the word skimming a lot, and it obviously is a highly prevalent form of EBT fraud. But I know for myself, I wasn't entirely sure what that meant when that word was thrown around. So I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit more about what is actually skimming. What does it look like? What is the process to skim or to clone an EBT card? And with that, luckily, we have a slide prepared. So
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and in fact, a lot of people don't really quite understand it because, as I just mentioned, card cloning used to be the largest form of fraud in the credit and debit card industry up till 2025, and most of the world migrated chip cards to try to mitigate that particular fraud. It was actually card skimming is what they were trying to mitigate, and what card skimming is that basically the criminal elements will put something onto your card reader, not just the ATMs or the fuel pumps, but also the readers within stores. And they can do it amazingly quickly. So the first step of it is that they get some type of device into a reader that when you swipe a make stripe, it can read the information on that make stripe. Now they capture that information and then they go and do one or two things. They will either create a clone card that looks exactly like the original card because they're going to get the name, they're going to get the account number, they're going to get, this pertinent account information that they need to create a clone card. And then they'll go and either they'll try to use it online or they'll use a physical card and use it in the store. So it's really a two-step process. First, you steal the data from the skimming device, then you use the data, could be online, could be a physical card. And then a third step oftentimes is that they're going to buy things that they can quickly and easily resell to others on the street. So it's actually a three-step process. And another kind of interesting thing to know and is that within skimming, that 60 to 70% of the time where they're stealing the data might not be where they actually use the data to commit the fraudulent transaction. So this is kind of a community effort. You really need to, as grocers, everybody put in lines of defense to prevent it in order to protect yourself and your customers, because if your customers are finding that the cards they use in your store are getting skimmed, or suddenly they're being used outside of it, that creates reputational risk for you.
Yeah, that's definitely something that surprised me because I was thinking it was mostly, one store was what would be, the entirety of the problem. But it really is kind of a community effort of fraud that's going on,
Right.
unfortunately. And
You
so,
know, and another thing,
yeah,
Carrie, about this is that, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but another kind of interesting thing about it is like, well, how the heck do they get a skimming device into, one of these readers, and why wouldn't you be able to notice it, right? It doesn't seem like that would be that easy to do, would it?
yeah, it does not seem easy. And we actually have some pictures of it. It's just important to note that even if you think that your store doesn't have skimmers, you could still be part of the issue because the stolen benefits could still be used at your card. But here are a few different examples of the skimmers. And so I was wondering if you could kind of talk us through what they look like, what these are that we're looking at.
Yeah, so two different types of skimmers. One is an insert skimmer. So this is where they actually insert the skimmer into the terminal in a way that you can't see it. The one that's on the left right here actually might be one that they could put into even one that's designed for chip card. Actually, both of them are. But at any rate, they're really designed to facilitate reading the data off of the bank stripe. And they look big on the screen right here, but they're actually really small enough such that I could walk by a terminal in a store, and maybe the cashier is looking the other direction, and I can insert this into the terminal. It's literally that quick. On the right-hand side, the overlay is more of, they put it over the terminal, looks just like the terminal. They look away, they quickly snap this over the terminal, and suddenly, the operator doesn't know any better that something's been put on it. What they used to do in the past, and they probably still do this in certain areas, is they would come with an identical terminal and they'd swap it out. And they'd program the terminal to always approve the transaction. So the cashier, the person operating the checkout, would have no reason to think that there's anything wrong. And then at the end of the day, they'd come back and they would replace the terminal, or it could be the next day, whichever the case would be. Usually it'd be within that same day. Now, something to point out on this particular, on the right, the overlay skimmer. Some people say, well, they stole the information off the make stripe, but there's pins to protect this. And with the overlay, if you look on the right hand side, it might be a little bit hard to see, but there's kind of these little green lines around the pin pad, or the number pad, and that's basically going underneath the real numbers, right? And that's where the pin is actually being intercepted. In other cases, like at an ATM and places like that, sometimes they'll have what they call pinhole cameras, and the cameras will actually take a video of the person entering their PIN. And that's why they usually say, cover your fingers as you enter in your PIN, so that somebody either isn't shoulder surfing, or they don't have pinhole cameras that are watching you as you enter your PIN. So, I think the important point about this particular slide, though, is just how quick you can insert one of these deep insert skimmers on the left. And even though it looks like it'd be more complex, these overlay skimmers can be fastened pretty quickly. They're designed to be fastened pretty quickly, so that nobody would recognize something's been placed on it.
Yeah, I know that we've heard anecdotally from grocers that they wouldn't have known until they looked at their security camera and just saw that within, 1 to 3 seconds, something could be snapped on very quickly. And that's when they realized they
Yeah.
had a problem,
And
unfortunately.
that's almost hard to believe. The other thing about these to keep in mind is that um, this data is being stolen, and I said that they used to like take the terminal back, and then they got to the point now that technology has advanced such that they can have a car parked in the parking lot, and
Yeah.
these skimmer devices have Bluetooth capabilities, so they can be a couple 100 feet away, and each time a card is being skimmed, the pin is being entered, there can be a car out there, and in fact, Carrie and I know somebody who runs a store who mentioned he came into the store one day and he saw out in the parking lot this van that had this antenna. He's like, well, what is going on with this vehicle with the antenna outside? It was actually a vehicle that was stealing the data through the Bluetooth connection to one of the devices in their store. So they're
Yeah.
becoming very sophisticated.
Yeah. Next on this slide, we have we're getting into some data on the background of fraud, but I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how big skimming is relative to other types of fraud.
So as you can see here, this is from several government reports that have found that skimming represents about 45%. So that's more than double, the second largest offender, let's call it, of fraud for the EBT, and that's phishing and social engineering. So even though it seems like it's a relatively unsophisticated in terms of you stick this little electronic board into the reader or you have that overlay on it. And there has to be somebody there present to do it. It represents still a large percent because once they get that data, it's so easy for them to either use that information online or creating a physical card to do it. The second largest type of attack is phishing or social engineering. And then after that drops, pretty substantially. You can see like application fraud is only 5%. I think there's a misperception out there in the public that application fraud for EBT is a very large percentage. In reality, it's a small percentage. Account takeover is one. We'll talk about that in a little bit. It's a little bit more than 15%. But the two biggest ones are the skimming, which is something that grocers can do something about. Then the phishing and social engineering, which isn't quite as easy for the grocers to do themselves, but it's something that's out there that you're being attacked by. I think that's all I have to say on this particular one. On the next slide, though, let's look at just kind of what's the trend going with this. So here, this slide, if you look on the left axis there, the y-axis, it's low, moderate, and high. And this is the relative growth rate trend. So if you look at skimming and card, notice here it says card cloning. I mentioned that earlier, how skimming and card cloning are pretty much the same thing. And from the lighter band of green, I guess it is, versus the darker shade of it, we have 2022 to 23 and 2023 to 2024. And in both of those periods, you see that the skimming was high, the growth rate is high, that's saying. Then you see phishing jumped from moderate to high. And then account takeover, I mentioned that earlier, is the one that suddenly had a shift up there too. And I'm just going to speculate on that. And that's because of just with the internet and the ability to use bots and use phishing and smishing schemes, which I'll talk about in a second, it just makes it easier and easier for people to try to steal enough information from somebody to take over their account. And you've probably heard of people's ID being taken over. This isn't quite that bad, but it's bad because their accounts are being taken over.
Yeah. And I realize that our presentation is primarily focusing on skimming, but just as we continue to talk about phishing a little bit, and I guess smishing as well, which was a new term that I had learned, can you tell us a little bit, since it is, a fairly prevalent type of fraud? I know in the next slide we have an example. Can you talk a little bit about what somebody could look for if they see this and what to do?
So phishing is when somebody is basically phishing for information from you. And how do they do it? The easiest way is through an email. Now, more and more people are using text messaging all the time or SMS messaging. And so if you use the text messaging, it's called smishing. If they're using email, it's called phishing. But again, the key point is they're phishing for you to give them data. And we're probably all receiving these texts all the time. Anybody that has a personal email, I think I probably get 3 of these a week of some form, not EBT, but other things. And a couple of things that you want to look at in these types of things is, first of all, if you look at the from line for the email address at ebtprogram.gov, for someone who isn't paying attention, they might think, well, that seems like the right email or a logical email address, but it isn't the official email address. So that's the first thing you got to look at. What is the email address that's used? And then the other thing, if you get into the body of it, that first sentence, so it says the card has been temporarily locked. So something that calls, is a cause for action right away. That makes it, oh, gee, my card's locked. I got to do something about this. Okay, and then the continuation of that sense of urgency within the next 24 hours, contact us to restore access to this. and you need to, we need to verify your EBT account. And if you don't, it's going to be suspended permanently. So, oftentimes there's going to be a link then that you cling to that will bring you to a spot where they'll then ask you for all the information that they need to then once again either create a clone card or maybe perform an account takeover. So it's not something that you as grocers can do much about in your stores, other than be aware of and let your employees know about it. Yeah. I'm sorry, I said something. And that's why we're not spending a lot of time on this here. The skimming is clearly the most prevalent, and that's why and this is something that you can deal with within your stores to help mitigate it.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answered the question. I went on a little bit long on that, Carrie.
No,
But
that makes sense. That makes sense. So as Guy said, we not only wanted to kind of give you information on what fraud is, but then also have tangible ways that you can help mitigate EBT skimming fraud. So with that, we're going to switch into the next portion of the webinar where we actually give you some advice and have some recommendations on things that you could pursue. So with that, can I have a quick overview? I'll let Guy talk about the very quick overview of the different types of mitigation options, but then we'll go into more detail on what each of these are as well.
So these are just, I'll call it the headline categories of methods for preventing or to mitigate skimming. And you just need to what it is, how can you use a device to visually see if there's some type of skimming device put in your terminal. Then there's certain hardware add-ons. So you have a terminal, there are pieces of hardware you can add on to help mitigate. There's Bluetooth skimming detection. Remember I mentioned that nowadays that they can actually transfer the terminals to via Bluetooth to somebody nearby to capture the information. There's third-party software, and this is actually more sophisticated where you get the software that you have to program specific to your particular setup to help you detect and identify skimming devices. There's transaction monitoring. Again, it's more of a software-oriented one. And of course, any type of central remote management monitoring that can be controlled by the POS terminal. Now, we're not going to go over the transaction monitoring remote management. That's going a little bit too far. And then finally, the EMV chip migration and how that could help with the mitigation. So that's at a high level of categories. And we're going to go over a few of these. This isn't an exhaustive list. It's just to give you a sense for what they are. And you could probably do searches on the internet or something for these type of skimming, visual inspection skimming mitigation or hardware add-on skimming mitigation. And you could probably get a list of the vendors that are out there. So we just wanted to give you the tools so you could on your own then kind of research and determine what fits for you.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. Because we're government funded, we're not allowed to give any recommendations on particular businesses or products. But as Guy said, if you do kind of a mildly detailed Google search, you can find some different solutions that will help. So let's start with visual inspection. We can talk a little bit about this and then move on to the other methods.
Okay, so first on the upper right, see it says physical tool CAD design files. So the main thing here is that just for each one of the slides, when you receive them, up in the right-hand corner, it'll give you a quick reminder of what type of a mitigation tool it is. And we'll start going from the easy ones, such as the physical tool for visual inspection, and then move on to the more sophisticated ones. But the intent of this type of tool is something that in your store you can have near the cash register, near the pin pad, and that you can, whether it's once a day or periodically, train the staff to just stick it in to make sure that it goes in all the way to ensure that there is no skimming device added to it. So this is, the quickest, the easiest to get done. You just then have to train and make sure that you have the due diligence to do it periodically. And if we go to the next slide, we have some pictures of what this looks like. So on the left-hand side here, you see the white and the orange, and they come in different sizes because every terminal is slightly different. And then if you look at the pictures, the green check mark and then the red X, the green check mark, you can see it's inserted all the way in. And if you look at the right-hand side of the X's, you see that the prongs don't go all the way in. They don't go over the top. So since it's not going over the top, it could be an overlay that's going on there because it should be able to fit, those prongs on top should be able to fit right over the top between that key there on each side of that key. So again, it's very quick. The trick to this, if you want to do this though, is that, like I said, every terminal is slightly different. And so this is where a CAD design tool is. You can actually get these CAD design tools and then have them printed. You could even, if you have, well, what are those printers that they have, these 3D printers that it states right there. You can get the CAD drawing for a 3D printer and make it specific for your device. And I'm sure there are other sources for you to get them, but very quick, very easy. It's just a matter of finding the right one to fit into your particular terminal.
Yeah, and I'll point out too, a lot of different areas, urban areas or even not urban areas have capability to do 3D printing. You just don't realize it because you don't use it that often. And there's also online stores where you can send away to have something be 3D printed. But this is something where if you do a Google search, you can figure out how to get these free drawings and then have them printed for pretty cheap. Some of the background reading that we read too, one of the things that it highlighted was just that, going through all of your POS terminals in store might take, I don't know, let's say an hour, a little bit longer to be able to visually inspect each of them on a daily basis. If you're doing it daily or weekly, what we've seen is that when people use this insert tool, it can drastically reduce the time to do the visual inspection to just a matter of minutes. You just slide it in, see if it fits, and if it doesn't, then you have a problem.
And I'd add on to
okay.
that too, Carrie, just real quickly, sorry,
Yeah.
but the other thing is that these things are so small, and think of, they can insert there, and you can insert cards and pull them out, and you don't know that they're there. So, like you said, trying to detect it without a device like this is actually pretty complex. Yeah. So moving on to hardware add-on. So what this is basically something that you attach your terminal to, and the intent of it is to lock down the terminal. Remember, I mentioned there are some cases where entities will actually swap out the terminal. So if that terminal isn't locked down, it could be swapped out. Obviously, the larger stores and chains and whatnot do normally have their terminals locked down. But if you're ever in a place that doesn't have them locked down, if your store doesn't have certain ones locked down, it's something that you really want to look into. And there's different forms of this. So this is just a lockdown. And I think, I don't know if you have any comments, Carrie, on this one, or if not.
We can go to the next slide. There's another example of another option as well, if that's helpful.
Okay. So on this one, again, you see in the bottom on the right-hand side, there's a way to lock down your terminal. But in addition to it, there's this little white piece in the front of it that would go onto it. And the intention of that little white piece is that it prevents a skimmer from being inserted into it. Okay, so these are nice. I mean, they're durable, obviously. And once you have it in, now you don't have to worry about trying to test them every day or anything like that. It's not to say that they're beatable, but it is a very common form to try to prevent skimming attacks at the pin pad.
Yeah, and I would say at the very least, it drastically slows down because what we were saying at the beginning of this presentation is it's very, very quick and easy to insert a skimmer or to apply a skimmer. And so having something that slows down that process is going to be a huge help. Somebody will see that and be like, I'm not even going to try because we know that it will take too long and it might get noticed in store.
Yeah, and I think just to add on one more thing before we move on this, Carrie, just notice that things that we're showing you are specifically designed for pin pads. And oftentimes, if you look around the internet and other places, they talk about these skimmers at ATMs. They talk about them at pay at the pump, places that are unattended because it's a lot easier for for people to or the criminal elements to insert these skimmers into them. But I just want to draw the attention that even though that's where you hear about it a lot, this happens a lot within the stores themselves. And that's why there are so many tools out there to help with the skimming. So I just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Don't rest and think that you're safe, I guess. Let's move on to Bluetooth skimmer detection.
Okay, so this is interesting because since the gathering of the data is becoming easier using technology like Bluetooth, they've come up with ways. What if we just scan? You walk by the cash registers and the pin pads, and you scan to see if there's any type of Bluetooth emissions coming out of it. And so that's what this device is, and there are many of them in the market right now. And again, it's something that's very quick, as Carrie mentioned earlier. With the physical ones, this is very quick. If you had somebody, during the day, maybe it's in the morning, at night, maybe it's once or twice a week, whatever you decide is your risk tolerance level. But you go through it and basically will identify when there's some type of Bluetooth emission that shouldn't be happening within your store. And then you start to hunt from there, find out where it's coming from.
You can make a game of it, maybe. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my mouse. Move on to the next option. This is another Bluetooth skimmer detection, but slightly different. So can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so this is like a very device specific, right? So you're literally mimicking a swipe of the card because that's what's oftentimes going to activate the Bluetooth transmission, right? So you swipe it and you look to see if the light turns on or off on that particular swiper device that you have right there. So it's nice because here you're testing the terminal, you know exactly what's happening right away. Notice it says it can detect up to 100 feet away the range of the receiver from that Bluetooth. And it's very quick. Again, just go through, swipe it quickly, and it'll tell you if there's something in that device or if the device is attempting to transmit something via Bluetooth.
The next one is a little bit more complicated, but if you have an IT team or, if you're handy with a bit of coding, it's something that is a really effective option as well. So that's using third-party software to help detect if you've got an issue. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so this is where we get a little bit more sophisticated in for those stores that have their own IT staff that maybe has done some development around your POS system. And they basically can get a hold of open source software. And Python is a language that is very sophisticated that people are starting to use now to be able to develop or build off of, I'll call them development kits that they have to make it very easy for you to create your own software to detect various aspects of it. And again, it's for those that maybe have developed their own systems, ones that have many lanes, maybe, and you need to have consistent, high traffic areas. You need to have consistent protection monitoring going on. Usually, this one here is talking about for Linux system. Again, we're not telling you the particular one, but I think you could probably find them for pretty much any type of system that there is out there. It just with the Linux systems in particular, they're very open source and much easier to plug and play.
If I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have IT staff that uses GitHub, I believe there's examples on GitHub that you can pull down and modify as needed.
Yep. Anything great point. Anytime anything's open source, GitHub is really your place to go get the data, pull it down. No cost. It's just a matter of your developing it to fit your particular solution. Yeah, great point.
And then finally, we're going to go to my favorite, which is the transition to using chip with your cards. And as soon as I find my mouse, I will advance the slide. But talk a little bit about, because you have an extensive background in when the traditional EMV credit cards did this. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you've seen with the trends in fraud?
Yeah, so first of all, let's talk about why did the global card networks move to the chip? And the reason was because on the make stripe, they basically had static data, which means there's data on the make stripe that didn't change. So they would encode it or write it, let's say, to the make stripe. And once they wrote it, it never changed. And so if you copied what was on that make stripe, you could just put that on the next card that has the make stripe, and the terminal, the issuer, nobody really had a way to know the difference. It's one of the reasons why they came up with the security codes that you read off of your card and that type of thing too. But the heart of the key point is that it's static data and doesn't change. What they did when they introduced the chip is that at every transaction, there's some data that changes that the host system or the issuer that it goes to for the approval knows what it should be. And they go through some very sophisticated cryptography to validate what they call a cryptogram to assure that the card is an authentic card. So ironically, even if someone were able to copy the chip, let's say, they would still be able to, because this numbering system would get out of sync, and the authorizer would still recognize that it was not the authentic card. And so that was their way to basically shut down the cloning or the skimming as much as possible. Now they're still looking for ways to try to attack it, and usually the way is, how do you make the cashier or the customer think that the chip isn't working and try to get them to what they call to fall back to a make stripe transaction. So the chip's not working out, you got to use your make stripe. And so it doesn't completely eliminate the skimming because they try to trick you into using that make stripe. And it makes perfect sense that the EBT and there's various other types of cards, gift cards and things like that are out there that still rely on make stripe. And since 2016, 2015 in the United States, all that skimming energy has started to be focused on those cards remaining in market that still use a make stripe. So hopefully that I answered your question, Carrie.
Yeah, no, very, very helpful. And I think I would just highlight, we have some quick stats at the bottom. Just when Visa and MasterCard did this, I saw a huge reduction in in-store or card present rather fraud. So that's with that, we're going to segue just quickly into the transition to chip cards for EBT. If you've been in any other NGA webinars, NGA Foundation webinars rather, or presentations at some of our NGA events, you might have heard about this already, but we're trying to get the word out as much as possible about what retailers can do to help make this transition. And as Guy said, this isn't the only thing that you should be doing. You should really kind of be doing a combination of things to be able to mitigate fraud as best as possible. So with that, just a couple kind of summary thoughts on the transition to EBT chip cards. And the reason I'm talking about this is because the foundation has been helping USDA as well as different states with their transition. So as Guy said, the reason it's happening is, we're transitioning from EBT cards that only had a magnetic stripe to cards that can also have insert only or insert tap functionality. And one, this modernizes EBT, but as we've learned, these new cards with chip are really difficult to clone, and it's much easier to be able to detect counterfeit cards than if you were just using a mag stripe only card. The transition to EBT chip cards has happened already in California. So they started rolling out these cards, I believe it was roughly January to February. Took several weeks, more like a couple months to be able to mail out the cards to everybody and get them in circulation. But California has done it. A lot of other states are following. So Oklahoma, Maryland, Alabama, New Jersey are probably the next states to go. It's important to remember too that SNAP EBT cards can be used in any state. So even though California is the only state thus far that has implemented these cards, people with EBT cards can use their card anywhere they want. So if you're in a neighboring state to California, you may have already seen them. You could see them, on the other side of the country as well. So it's important to be prepared for this change. Going to change the slide real quick. If you go to the USDA website, So I pulled this map yesterday. It may, because of the shutdown, it may not be updated while the shutdown is occurring. I was going to say you could go to this anytime to get, real-time information on what's going on with EBT chip rollout, but there might be a bit of a lag now. The state rollout really depends on a few different things. So first and foremost, it's sort of the timing of the contract that the state has with their EBT host processor. So if a state has a contract that's expiring in 2027, they're probably not going to be going in the next few months in terms of implementing chip cards. So they'll wait until the contract is closer to expiration and renewal. It also depends on state budgets as well as staff bandwidth. And one thing that could possibly impact that is just some changes that we've seen with SNAP where states are going to be responsible for more of the administrative cost of administering SNAP. And so that could impact state budgets and potentially impact the rollout of EBT chip. But so far, states are still continuing with the plan. And then it also just depends on their priorities for EBT modernization. For instance, Illinois is a state that is part of the mobile payments pilot. So the thing that they're focusing on with their modernization is to be able to offer EBT payment tender, via a mobile wallet. And they're sort of skipping the step to do EBT chip card rollout and mailing out of cards. So they're going to do mobile payments first and then reassess. And more information is on the USDA site as well as the NGA Foundation or SimTech site as well. And then I just wanted to talk very quickly about the importance of testing EBT chip cards. So if you are a retailer on this call and you're interested in testing in store to see if you have full chip functionality, or if at the very least you can successfully fall back to magnetic stripe, one of the first things that you should do is contact your point of sale provider to get a test card. If you have trouble with that, though, feel free to reach out to me or to the NGA Foundation, and I can help facilitate getting test cards to anybody that asks for them. And the reason this is important is first and foremost, it ensures that, so if you do the testing, it ensures that your SNAP participants can continue to access their benefits. There's a few reasons why this matters. I mean, obviously, you want people to be able to access their benefits. It can be really embarrassing for customers if they have a failed transaction, but it also can reduce store brand trust in your store or your store brand. So if a customer thinks either correctly or incorrectly that they can't use their chip card at your store, they're going to go to a different store to see if they can purchase their goods at a different store. And as we all know, SNAP revenue is a really important source of income for retailers. Another reason to do testing is just that it allows training of your staff, and it just helps ensure that there's no disruptions at customer checkout. No retailer wants something to go wrong at checkout and have a long line of people that are getting frustrated. So the more testing you can do, the smoother it's going to be, either when you start to see these cards in your store, or when your state officially rolls out chip as well. And switch it. And I guess I won't talk too much about this because I've kind of talked about it a lot. But the ways in which the foundation is helping is just we work very closely with USDA, the Food and Nutrition Service. We are in daily communication with them. We assist getting test cards. We have helped develop resources, and we understand the information and the resources that they're providing, as well as the different host processor companies. And really just our goal is to try to troubleshoot as much as possible with retailers so they don't have any problems and that their customers don't have any problems. With that, we're just going to summarize some tips for retailers. And I know we only have about 10 minutes, so we'll do just a I think it's just one slide of summary. But we're gonna both talk about this slide. So Guy, I think you are first on one of the things that retailers could do.
So one thing I want to point out is that in this whole chip migration period that the EBT is going through, it's really important to stay active with skimming mitigation. Because remember what I mentioned at the beginning, is it's that balloon effect that if you're focusing on one area to mitigate against fraud, that fraud's going to shift over to another area. And what's going to happen here is that the stores that don't use a chip, the skimming devices are going to start going towards those stores more and more in higher concentration. So be aware if you're one of the first to implement or chip cards, that's wonderful acceptance. If you're later in the process and think, well, we'll just wait until we get the chip card, I think the history has shown is that the migration will happen to those states and those retailers that haven't yet implemented a chip accepting card. So whether it's the quick physical device, inexpensive, something you do very quickly, or getting something to more sophisticated where you get to the Bluetooth scanning process, definitely consider getting some type of a hardware device that helps lock down your terminal, because you'll want that even in a chip card implementation. And also think about when they get to the chip card and they put the new terminals in, that there's still devices that you'd like to, it's probably wise to put on the terminals hardware devices to make it more difficult for them to still put the skimming devices in, because like I mentioned before, when we first showed that skimming device, they may put in skimming device that will interfere with the chip communication, wanting you to swipe the make stripe. So even after you accept the chip cards, you still want to make sure you have, you're really vigilant about checking periodically for skimming devices.
Yeah, all good advice. The other thing that you should do, as we just talked about, is just upgrade to your chip card acceptance. So I won't go into too much detail about that. The only thing I will say, though, is that even if you already accept chip for like a traditional Visa, MasterCard, credit card, that does not mean that you can accept EBT chip. So the new chip for EBT has a new service code and a new application identifier. So there's some coding or point of sale updates that need to be done in order to accept the EBT chip as well. And with that, I will move on to the next one for Guy.
So, and I talked about being vigilant. I think empower your staff to report any type of suspicious activity, train them about how to test if you have the physical testers or otherwise. The other thing that I didn't cover in that first column there is make sure that if there's going to be some type of scheduled service or something with the terminal, that the staff know about it, or make sure they know that don't let anybody touch our terminals unless they've heard specifically from management that there's going to be somebody coming in to do it. That's very important. And again, having the lockdown device so that it can't be easily swapped out. And again, there's a hotline here for general information underneath the stay vigilant to educate staff portion of it. Can't stress enough that the more you educate your staff on it, I know it's a high turnover position, things like that, and spend a lot of time on it. But this is something where just a little bit of time can really pay off dividends.
Yeah, definitely. And then last, we just wanted to say that there's ways that you can support your SNAP customers too. So if one of your staff is helping a customer where they've realized that they have their benefits have been stolen, essentially, you should advise them that they should change their PIN immediately. So the PIN is required for every SNAP transaction, and if they change that PIN, they can at least stop temporarily or until somebody figures out the PIN. And they should also contact their local SNAP office. And so when we send out the link, or when we send out these slides, there's links to be able to have that information as well. And with that, I will just move on to the next slide. So I get my mouse. We just wanted to say thank you for attending this. We hope it's been informative. If you have any questions, feel free to look at the semtac.org website, which is part of the National Grocers Association Foundation. Feel free to reach out to me directly or to Guy. And then also there is an EBT chip dedicated mailbox if you have questions about that. Any questions that anyone has?
Thank you so much, Carrie and Guy. Those pictures were so helpful. The data that you shared was extremely helpful too. There's a lot of different ways to approach these issues. I'm going to invite anyone from the audience to submit questions. The easiest way to do that is to type it into the chat. But we do have a small group, so if you'd like to come off mute and just ask your question live, that would be fine too. While people are thinking of things that they might want to discuss further, I am curious if there's anyone here who is from the state of California and has experienced the chip migration, or maybe one of the other states that Carrie had listed as likely to be next up. Curious to hear your experience. Go ahead and share that in the chat if you are so interested. We do have a question. I see S. I'm going to unmute you, and you should be able to, let's see, disable camera. Oh, I apologize. For some reason, the setting is not letting me unmute you. You can
Oh.
go. Oh, there you go. You did it.
Hi, so this was definitely informative. So I just had a question with regards to, and this was news to me, excuse me, in one of the photos where they skim the device at the ATM. How much do those cost approximately? I know a lot of our stores do use the other device, the skimming device, but with regards to that other device, I forgot the name of it. But what is the cost in terms of the first one that you that was on this slide?
Are you talking about the mitigation devices, or are you talking about the actual skimming devices that they use?
The actual skimming device.
They're pretty inexpensive. They probably can get some of those now in the market for it's something as low as $20 or something like that. Could even be less.
Okay. Okay. And for the mitigation, because like I said, the majority of our stores do use the plastic skimming device.
Yep.
But with regards to the skimming, what is the price range for those?
Oh, I'm this
Like
sort of
the
skimming mitigation device.
Mm,
I think you can get them for as little as like $70.
okay.
And then depending on the sophistication level, it goes up into like 250, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. If anybody else has one, go ahead and enter it in the chat. We've got a couple minutes yet. I do have another question, Carrie, as you spoke about the EBT chip migration. That's kind of one of many items that fall under modernization of the SNAP program. Is there anything else that's kind of on the horizon that you want to share with the listeners today?
I would just say that the next thing that is going concurrently with the EBT chip migration is mobile payments. So there are currently 3 states that are part of the mobile payments pilot with USDA, and they have partner retailers that they're working with as well in each of the states. And so that's just the ability to use your EBT benefits, using a Google or Apple Pay wallet. But part of it is just for modernization, is to introduce parity in payment tenders. And then it also helps greatly with fraud as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate all your expertise that you shared with us today, both Carrie and Guy. And also to all attendees, thanks for being part of the NGA community and spending your part of your day with us. Together, we're keeping independent grocery strong and rooted in our communities. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, everyone.